Hello, I'm Stefan Graber. I'm the project leader for LexD, and today we're going to be looking at our latest tutorial that's been published on our community forum. It's called Getting Started with IRC, and it goes through how to set up a working environment to connect to the Libera chat network, specifically to join the LXC support channel. That's what we use for the bulk of our live chat, even within the development team. We've got a couple of channels on there that we use for different things. The hash LXC channel being the main one that's used for support for users of LXD. On our forum, you can easily find a link at the top that will get you to a completely online version of an IRC client that kind of looks like this. The issue with that particular client is that IRC is a pretty old school chat system, which doesn't get you any kind of history on connection. So you only get to see what's being said while you're connected. And so one of those web clients, it's very easy for you to close that tab or for your computer to go to sleep or something like that, and you're going to miss potentially someone answering your question because you won't have been connected at the right time. So what this tutorial does is goes through a number of steps to set up a system that runs a IRC client, which can then be attached to either through the command line or that you can use, you can connect to from a web browser or from an Android app. And in this video, I'm just going to be following through the instructions that have been published, and that should get us a working setup and being connected to IRC. So let me switch over to a terminal. And what I've got here is a newly installed Ubuntu 20.04 system. It's on a Raspberry Pi 4, which happen to have around. We'll see that the exact same instructions would work perfectly fine on a cloud instance in the cloud somewhere, or some virtual machine or anything that's running, in this case, an Ubuntu server installation. One thing that's useful with Ubuntu 20.04 server is that LXD actually comes pre-installed as a snap. So we can see it here that it is pre-installed LXD 4.7 in this case. So we don't really need to do anything there as far as installing LXD. The only thing that we do need to do is just configuring it. So I'm going to be running LXD init. That asks a number of questions. In this case, we're not going to do anything fancy, so we're just going to be picking the defaults, which means hitting enter quite repeatedly. This will create a storage pool and a network that can be used by the containers. And we're done. At this point, following the instructions in that tutorial, let's create a Ubuntu 20.04 container called that IRC. So that's going to download the latest image for Ubuntu 20.04, unpack it, create the container, and start it. That doesn't usually take very, very long. The unpacking stage being the slowest, and that only needs to happen the first time we create a container. Any additional container being created will not need to go through this. All right, now let's get into that container. All right, so we're root in the container now. Just update the package list. We can see it's downloading the ARM64 package list because, again, this is running on Raspberry Pi. And we'll install the client. So the client in this case is called Weechat. It's one of the more featureful IRC clients these days. Just go with installing that. It's also worth noting that there are like GUI type clients that you can install directly on a Linux system or Windows or Mac OS. But they have the exact same issue as the web client, which is that if they're not running, you're not seeing what's going on during that time. So in an approach like this, we'll avoid those kind of problems by being effectively always connected to the network, and you can connect and look back at any kind of the chat history in the different rooms that you're in. All right, so Weechat is now installed and going to be creating, as the goal is really to run it effectively as a service in the background. I'm going to be creating a user just for Weechat. So that's a user called Weechat with a home directory invalid Weechat. Righty. Then the next thing that we're going to be doing is switch over to that user and create a certificate. That is used for authentication with the IRC network we're connecting to. The traditional authentication on IRC is usually would usually use just a plain text password, but that's not ideal because it's like there's sometimes a bit of a delay for authentication on the server side when you send a clear text password, which might prevent you from joining some channels. And there is also the slight issue of security where if you're not careful what server you're connecting to, or then they might get that password and you have to deal with resetting it and all of that kind of stuff. Well, the certificate, you hold the private key, the server just gets the public key, so there's no real issue there around security. When creating the certificate, it does ask a few questions around country name and a bunch of other things. I'm gonna actually fill in valid values, but it doesn't matter in this case, so you can absolutely enter whatever you feel like. So in this case, Quebec, Montreal, yeah, and no additional unit, and we'll just call the certificate Weechat and no email address. All right. So now that has created the certificate, let's create the configuration directory for Weechat. Move the certificate that just got generated into that. And now we're gonna get to actually configuring Weechat. So just started. So that's what it kind of looks like out of the box. It's a pretty old school looking text interface. The first thing to do is going to be adding the actual chat server that we're using. So in this case, it's going to be, we'll call it Libera Chat, and the server is irc.libera.chat. The port for SSL, so secure, for the secure server is 6697, and we pass /SSL so that it is using SSL to connect. So that's done. Then we can just, we need to configure Weechat to remember what the valid addresses are for the server. I'm just gonna enter the same thing again, effectively 6697. So it's set. Some more configuration needed against the server itself. So done on SSL. Tell it to validate the server certificate, and then tell it to use our own certificate to connect, like so. And lastly, we're gonna tell it that the authentication mechanism, if I can write properly there, is external. Okay, at which point we can actually connect to this thing. So connect to the Libera Chat. And it says that the Weechat nickname is already taken, so we actually end up with Weechat 3 in this case. But we can then rename ourselves to whatever we want. In this case, let's call it Lexi Demo. So now I'm known as Lexi Demo on that chat server. And to avoid people stealing your nickname, you need to register it. So you do that with sending a message to the nextserv server with the command register some password, which gets replaced with asterisk because you type it, and then an email address. So in this case, I'll send it to me and send. This will then send me an email that I need to go to get a validation code. Oh, actually, there's a tiny difficulty here. I didn't actually read the full message. I'm obviously been using this network a fair bit, so I actually have too many accounts. Let's just use another account. Another email address, just this one. Ah, that's annoying. Well, let's use this one. Yay! So clearly you can only have like, I guess, 3 or 4 accounts on any one email address. Because I run a number of services and whatnot, I've got a few, and that's been a bit of a problem. So this got registered. I got the registration code by email, and I just need to verify it. So I've got to do next serve verify register, and followed by the nickname, and followed by the code that's being sent by email, which is this one in this case. And it says LexiDemo has now been verified. Thank you for verifying your email address. You have taken steps in ensuring that your registration are not exploited. Okay, so that's all good. Next step here is to add the certificate, because again, like I did set a password, but I don't want to actually use it. So we need to tell nextserve that we want to add a certificate. So we just do cert add. It read our certificate, picked the public key, added it on the server list, and now we're effectively done with authentication. What we just need to do is making sure that we will automatically connect to the server. So we can do auto connect on. Then we should tell it what our nickname is, so that we don't join as Weechat, but we join in this case as LexiDemo. There we go. And lastly, we can set what channels we'd like to join. In this case, because the goal is to get LXC support, we're gonna be adding the LXC support channel. Okay, then save the config and quit. Now, if I just start it back up, we're gonna see, so you can actually switch between different windows with Alt and the arrow keys. The initial window kind of shows the server status. It shows that we got connected and authenticated, and that's all good. And the second window is the LXC support channel, where we could be asking questions. We can see in here that we joined as LXC demo. It shows that our user is actually Weechat, and that's the effectively the FQDN for my home connection. So there I could ask questions and get support. So that works, but it didn't really solve our problem. We're dealing with a pretty old looking text interface. And if I close my terminal, I'm getting disconnected, I don't get history. So even though it's running on a remote machine, it's not really doing me much good. Now, there are a couple of ways around that. One way would be just run the text that text client inside a screen or tmux session. I'm not sure if either of those is actually installed by default in Ubuntu. No, they're not. But you could install screen or tmux and then just run that in the background session that you can reattach to. That's one way of doing it, but the tutorial is more focused on the more user-friendly way of accessing through the web interface. So for that, we'll just start Weechat again, so we need to reconfigure it a bit. Let's switch to the main window. So for that, I used the Alt and left arrow key, but you could also do Alt 1 or Alt 2 with to actually switch based on the numbers that you see at the top left. One thing that the tutorial does mention is that you can actually add a filter, so we can just do that quickly. What that filter does is it will hide some of the join and leaving messages. So that way, when people actually connect or disconnect to the network, you don't see those so much. So that filter got added. That's all good. Should probably do save. And now for the interesting part, it's adding a relay. So Weechat effectively has a built-in server that clients can connect to. There's a web client that I'll be using in a tiny bit, or there's even a client that you can use from Android that you can install on your phone. In this case, we're just going to be setting up Weechat on port 9000. So the relay got added. We can set a password on that relay. They're very secure for the 4-letter password. And that's pretty much it. This is configured now, so I could connect from this particular system on the IP address of my container on port 9000, and it would work. The problem here being that this is actually a Raspberry Pi. I don't have a desktop on it, so I can't really run a web browser on it. So for that, we need to just reconfigure a few things, and the tutorial also goes over that. So first thing, we're going to be closing Weechat again, and going to be following the instructions inside the tutorial to have it work in headless mode. So I switched back to the root user by logging out from the Weechat user. I'm installing now a package called Weechat headless, and we're going to be creating and tutorial actually uses Nano, so let's use Nano because it can be a bit more user-friendly than VI sometimes. Yeah. So using Nano, I'm going to be creating a custom unit in systemd called weechat.service. Just going to be copy-pasting that one from what we have in the tutorial. There we go. And then exit and save. And then enable that particular unit and start it. What the unit does is that it will start Weechat in headless mode as the Weechat user. So if we look at the process list, we should see it here, all the way at the bottom. There's Weechat now running in headless mode as the Weechat user. And because we configured it to listen on that port 9000 with the relay, even though we can't access the text interface anymore, it doesn't really matter because we'll be accessing it from something a bit more user-friendly. The last step we need to do here is get out of the container. So just did Control-D for that. Look at, so if we look at the container list, we can see it's running on a private IP address that I can't actually reach from my machine. So if I try from my machine to get to 10.36.25.66, it's not gonna work. But my machine can reach the actual Raspberry Pi, which is at 17, 16, 15. The problem there being that if I try to reach it on port 9000, that's not going to work. There's nothing listening on there because Weechat is listening on the container's address, not the host's address. To fix that, we will add a LXD proxy device. So we'll code the proxy device Weechat relay. It's of the proxy type. The listen address, that's the address on the host side, is just going to be on every single address on port 9000. And on the container side, we will want to connect to TCP 127.0.0.1.9000. Okay. And now if I try from my laptop, it is responding. So that's it as far as the setup for the container. Now we can ignore that container effectively and move back to a web browser to try and connect to it. Let's try that. And for that, I'm going on a website that's linked from the tutorial as well, which is called GlowingBear. Looks like this. It's normally meant to connect to localhost by default. That is obviously not what we want here. What I need is the IP address of my Raspberry Pi, so it's 172.17.16.15. The port is 9000 in this case, and I enter the password. You can have the web browser remember the password, that's fine. Can have it automatically reconnect. In this case, I did not enable encryption, so let's not try to do encryption. Oops. And try to connect. Come on, Weechat. The client was unable to connect to the Weechat relay. Okay. Okay. Right, so that's actually a small Firefox issue, which is GlowingBear itself is running over HTTPS, not HTTP, and so it will refuse to connect to HTTPS to non-encrypted targets. So I'm just I now loaded the page as just plain HTTP, and that should work around that particular issue. So again, save password, automatically reconnect. Yep, that works just fine. So now GlowingBear just connected to that remote Weechat running on Raspberry Pi, we can see the exact same windows as you get on the text interface, but now from the web interface. So that's the first one here called Weechat, is the main, the configuration page. Then the LiberaChat one shows the everything that the server said upon connection. And then you've got the LXC support channel here. You can see that we connected a few times, and the list of everyone in the channel. And now it works perfectly fine. Like if we somehow refresh or close the tab or something, it will just reconnect and just gets us back exactly where we were with the history and everything. So long as the Raspberry Pi or your cloud instance or whatever Ubuntu system or any other distro that you have running around that can run an LXD container is still running, then this works. And that way you can look at what other LXD or LXD users are asking about in the support channel. And you can join other communities. LiberaChat also has like all of the Ubuntu communities on it, CentOS, and a whole Gentoo, a whole bunch of other Linux distributions and other open source projects are all on this chat network. So you can totally join those channels. You just want to configure then Weechat to automatically join the channels that you care the most about, so that if it gets restarted, it will automatically rejoin. And that's it. So that's it for this tutorial. Hope that was quite useful. We'll be linking this to the from the post in the tutorial itself. And thanks for watching.